Hey there, History of the Americas. Okay, so where we left off yesterday, we were just getting to the Four Freedoms speech. And this was an address by Roosevelt on January 6, 1941, to Congress, and one of the more famous speeches actually in American history. And the Four Freedoms speech was an expression of the president's vision in which the American ideals of individual liberties were extended throughout a world already engaged in war. Roosevelt ended the speech with a description of the four essential human freedoms, and we're going to look at some of these depictions that actually a lot of money was raised by Norman Rockwell for war bonds. And so let's see if you can guess what each of the freedoms are. Guess the freedoms. All right, take a look at this. What do you think is going on here? And you can feel free to stop the video and talk about this and pause at each picture and to look for some pieces of evidence of what this could possibly be addressing. So what do you think? What are some clues? Okay, let's go to the next one. What do we think this one is? I think the clues here are a little more evident, and obviously there is a caption. This one, that's not really it. But let me show you what it really looked like. Okay, this is the actual picture. Okay. That one it was just kind of funny. But you've probably seen this one. I feel like this one has been kind of out in popular culture. And then of course when we first started back looking at this, there was this lovely ditty, which is a spoof. Right? Freedom to supersize it. The American way. Yay. Let's take a look at this next one. Mom and Dad tucking the kiddos in. Okay, so looking at these four pictures, really solidifying the four freedoms that Roosevelt addressed in his speech. And these four freedoms are freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And this was the president's vision in which the American ideals of individual liberties were extended throughout the world. So kind of interesting to look at and to think about. Now this speech, Roosevelt also proposes a very ambitious Lend-Lease program whereby the United States would become the arsenal of democracy by reinforcing, I should say, Britain. I think that's a really key line, becoming the arsenal of democracy to help Britain out. We Americans are vitally concerned in your defense of freedom. We are putting forth our energies, our resources, and our organizing powers to give you the strength to regain and maintain a free world. We shall send you in ever-increasing numbers, ships, planes, tanks, and guns. That is our purpose and our pledge, was in this speech. So I really want you to think about the German perspective here, and like how do you think they took this speech? How do you think the rest of the world kind of took the speech, and even Americans at the time? Now, edging towards war, I don't have it set on my presentation, so it's going to look funky, but I'll pull it together. All right, so edging towards war, FDR proposes the Lend-Lease Act, and the United States could lend or lease arms to any country considered vital to the defense of the United States. And this is passed by Congress. And so you can see the cute little Dr. Seuss cartoon. Kind of interesting. It's truly encouraging how much of this stuff drifts into the British port. And take a look here. So here's a quote. Suppose my neighbor's home catches fire, and I have a length of garden hose 400 or 500 feet away. If he can take my garden hose and connect it up to his hydrant, I may help him to put out his fire. I don't say to him, before that operation, Neighbor, my garden hose cost me $15. You have to pay me $15 for it. I don't want $15. I want my garden hose back after the fire is over. Interesting. All right, let's talk about hemispheric defense zone. FDR developed this thing called hemispheric defense zone, which declared that the western half of the Atlantic as part of the Western Hemisphere and therefore neutral. And he's really going to put pressure on our Latin American countries through the Good Neighbor policy to make sure he solidifies at his hemispheric defense zone. And that is one of the factors that leads to Germany, Nazi Germany, declaring war on places like Brazil. All right. This allowed Roosevelt to order the U.S. Navy to patrol the Western Atlantic Ocean and reveal the location of German submarines to the British. Okay, this Atlantic Charter, we need to talk about this. August of 1941. President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill. There's Winston Churchill. He's the Prime Minister for the United Kingdom from 40 to 45, and then again from 51 to 55. So you might just want to keep that in mind. Winston Churchill and FDR sit down. They agree on what is known as the Atlantic Charter. And this is August of 1941, and this really starts to look at post-war world of democracy, non-aggression, free trade, economic advancement, and freedom of the seas. So already looking at like, okay, once we get through this war, then what? What is the plan to go through this war and after the war? I think it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Now, there's this incident, the Reuben James. And so after a German U-boat fires on an American destroyer, American ships were basically given the orders to shoot on sight to any German submarines that they see. And Germans torpedoed and sank an American destroyer known as the Reuben James in the North Atlantic on the 31st of October 1941. So what we start to see is kind of shoot on sight, somewhat unrestricted, obviously, submarine warfare. And this gets turned into a song that is an interesting little ditty. And I'm going to play it for you now just for a few minutes.
And by hard fighting men, both of honor and fame, she flew the stars and stripes of this land of the free. Tonight she's in her grave on the bottom of the sea. Tell me what was their names, tell me what was their names. You have a friend on that good Reuben James. What was their names, tell me what was their names. You have a friend on that good Reuben James. Well, 100 men went down in that dark, watery grave. When that good ship went down, only 44 were saved. 'Twas the last day of October, we saved the 44 from the cold ocean waters of that cold Iceland shore.
God, it's just so catchy, isn't it? Okay, what were their names? Did you have a friend on the good old Reuben James? You could imagine when this song, this is a remake of it by Woody Guthrie, who they showed in the beginning. But when this song broke and kind of the feelings and the emotion that it inspired and the fact that, like, you know, Americans were attacked and perished because of German attacks. So I think it's really important to see the role of pop culture of nudging opinion. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about a little bit about what's going on in the Atlantic, I want to draw our attention to another theater of where war will take place, which is Japan. Okay, and remember back to world history where Japan is starting to seek an empire. It's creating an empire, basically Asia for Asians. I'm not making that up. That's literally kind of the ideology behind it. and it's conflicting with the United States goal of maintaining an open trade policy in Asia, especially the open door policy in China. Now, this map right here is 42, but really what we start to see, 31 going into Manchuria, and the aim is to go down and solidify and to make sure that they have control of this sphere and to kick out the previous imperialists, and to control Asia. So keep that in mind. That's going to be useful as we go through. Let's take a look at America's embargo on oil and steel. So being an island nation, Japan kind of needs resources. And by July of 1941, Japanese aircraft posed a direct threat to the British Empire. The United States responds by freezing all Japanese assets in the U.S. and reducing the amount of oil and steel shipped to Japan. So that's not going to go over so great. So Japan attacks the United States. Well, let's take a look at this. The Japanese decide to attack resource-rich British and Dutch colonies in Southeast Asia. They actually seize the Philippines and they attack Pearl Harbor. Okay, December 7th, 1941. So let's take a look at a few things here. Dr. Seuss is always good to look at. End of the nap. All right, time to wake up, America. Okay. So on an early Sunday morning, this is what we can imagine it may have been like. This is a scene from Pearl Harbor. Not altogether historically 100% accurate in some ways and shapes in that film, but this is kind of an interesting scene.
Why the hell is the Navy doing practice this early on a Sunday? Jesus Christ. Another dumb drill. Son of a...
Okay, so that film is not 100% accurate with history, but there are elements that I really like that film actually. It's kind of a cool one. Like this Cuba Gooding Jr. plays Dory Miller, who was a real person in history, and This film is interesting in the fact that it definitely depicts the segregated military units that we had. But check it out. Also, another really good one is Code Talkers, about the Navajo wind talkers or code breakers that helped contribute during this war. So let's move. Speech yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. And this is how